My mom literally called the sheriff department the day before because he was stalking her, and they did nothing.
Krystal Evans and her ex-husband, Tom Mallory, were at the courthouse Friday afternoon. They were there for a hearing when Mallory allegedly shot Evans a number of times, killing her. Investigators say he ran from police and eventually shot himself, but he survived.
The daughter of Krystal Evans says her mother did not have to die.
What happened to her? It was preventable. It's still preventable, and that's the part that should make you angry. People will tell you she should have just left. She did leave. She filed the paperwork. She got the protective order. She did every single thing she was told to do. That's it. One filing. One protective order. One request for an escort that never made it to the right person. 2 days after her divorce was finalized, Krystal Evans Mallory was dead, shot in her own car, parked outside the courthouse that had just granted her permanent protection from the man who killed her. He had been sitting in that same courthouse minutes earlier. Krystal was 44, a real estate entrepreneur from Griffin, Georgia, the kind of woman people in her community described as someone who never met a stranger. She had spent over a year publicly warning anyone who would listen that this exact outcome was coming. She named him. She dated her posts. She built a paper trail with her own hands because she understood, correctly, that the system protecting her on paper might not be enough. This case involves domestic violence and gun violence. If either of those is difficult for you, please take care while watching. Welcome to Crime Scalers. Subscribe if you want more cases where the system had every chance to act and didn't. Like this video, drop a comment telling us where you're watching from, and share it with someone who needs to see how close doing everything right can still come to not being enough. Krystal Evans Mallory built her life in Griffin, Georgia, working as a real estate entrepreneur in a city small enough that most people recognized her name before this case ever made headlines. She was known in her community as approachable and warm, the kind of person described later by her own daughter as someone who never met a stranger. She and Tom Mallory had known each other since childhood. Their relationship carried that history into adulthood, and by the time this case became public record, they had been married for more than 20 years. 2 decades is not a small stretch of time. It is enough time to raise a family, build routines, and construct a shared life that looks, from the outside, like something stable. Tom Mallory was not a stranger to that community either. He was her husband, a man she had chosen and stayed with through the ordinary and difficult stretches that come with 2 decades of marriage. This is worth saying plainly, without embellishment. Nothing in the public record suggests Tom Mallory entered this marriage as anything other than a husband trying to build a life alongside his wife. Whatever came later does not erase that this was, for a long time, a real marriage between 2 people who knew each other since they were young. But somewhere inside those 20-plus years, something in that relationship began to fracture. Court records show the marriage reached a breaking point by late 2022, when Krystal made the decision to file for divorce. What exactly triggered that decision at that specific point in time has not been detailed in public reporting, and this script will not speculate where the record is silent. What is documented is the outcome. The filing itself. That single legal action, filed quietly in a Spalding County courtroom in late 2022, would set in motion nearly 2 years of conflict, court appearances, police calls, and warnings that Krystal herself would post publicly for anyone paying attention to see. The marriage was ending. What came next would take far longer, and cost far more, than either of them could have known at the time she signed that filing. By the time Krystal Evans Mallory filed for divorce in late 2022, Spalding County law enforcement was not encountering this couple for the first time. According to Sheriff Daryl Dix, deputies had responded to multiple domestic disturbance calls at the Mallory residence in the years prior. This was not a single incident that ended a marriage. It was a pattern, documented across repeated calls to the same address. What made those calls difficult to act on, according to the sheriff's own public account, was the nature of the accusations. Both Krystal and Tom made claims against each other at different times. Dix described it directly. There were occasions when Krystal alleged Tom had hit her or pulled a gun on her, and other occasions when Tom claimed Krystal had struck him or fired a weapon at him. On at least one occasion, both parties agreed the physical altercation had been mutual, with both contributing to property damage. Deputies documented at the scene. This is where Georgia's family violence law becomes relevant, and it will matter again later in this story. Under Georgia statute, once deputies determine a primary aggressor in a domestic violence call, that person's arrest is not optional. The law states that person shall be arrested. The word carries legal weight. It removes discretion once the aggressor is identified. The problem was identification. Witnesses interviewed by deputies on multiple occasions told investigators they either saw nothing or that what they saw did not match either party's account. Physical evidence was inconsistent. Sometimes there were bruises that could not be dated to a specific incident. Sometimes there was nothing visible at all. Without a clear aggressor, Georgia's mandatory arrest provision had nothing to attach to. Tom Mallory was arrested once during this period on a domestic violence charge. He posted bond and was released. That detail matters because it confirms law enforcement had, at minimum, one moment of clear cause to intervene. What happened after that arrest, and how the relationship continued to deteriorate from there, would not stay behind closed doors for much longer. Krystal was done managing this privately. What she did next, she did in public, on purpose, with her name attached. By the summer of 2024, Krystal Evans Mallory shifted her approach. She stopped handling the conflict with Tom Mallory privately and started building a public, dated record of exactly what she was experiencing, with his name attached to every post. On August 3, 2024, she posted a message describing her fear directly. She wrote that she felt she had to walk around terrified for her life and her children's lives, and stated plainly that if anything happened to her, people should know who was responsible. She named Tom Mallory in that post. She wrote that he had told her multiple times that he intended to kill her, and that she was posting publicly to leave what she called a paper trail. She used that exact phrase. A paper trail. Not a vague warning. A deliberate, time-stamped record, built specifically so that if the worst happened, there would be no ambiguity about who caused it. Weeks later, she posted a still image captured from a Ring doorbell camera. The caption was short and direct, telling Tom to stay away from her and her family, calling him a sick man, and asking to be left alone. This was not an emotional outburst. It was documentation. A visual record, time-stamped, showing his presence somewhere he was not supposed to be. Her final public message to him came one day before her death. She wrote asking him to leave her alone, telling him it was over, asking him to move on with his life. The tone was tired more than afraid. A woman who had said the same thing, in different words, for over a year, hoping this time it would land. None of these posts were written by someone hiding what was happening to her. They were written by someone who understood, correctly, that visibility was one of the only protections she had left. She was building a case in real time, using the only platform she had immediate control over, because the legal system moving through her divorce and the law enforcement responding to her calls had not been enough on their own. If this level of documentation, and the fact that it still wasn't enough to save her, is sitting with you the way it's sitting with us, subscribing helps keep cases like this in front of more people. Krystal did everything she could to make sure her story would be heard. The least this channel can do is make sure it stays that way. What happened over the next 48 hours would decide whether any of that documentation mattered. On September 11, 2024, the Mallory divorce, filed nearly 2 years earlier, was finalized. In the same order, Krystal Evans Mallory was granted a permanent protective order against Tom Mallory. On paper, this was the moment the legal process was designed to protect her. A finalized divorce. A permanent order, not temporary, not pending renewal. The strongest civil protection Georgia's family court system offers someone in her position. The next day, September 12, Krystal reported that the order had already been violated. The specific nature of that violation has not been detailed in public reporting, and this script will not fill that gap with speculation. What is confirmed is the timing. Less than 24 hours after receiving the strongest legal protection available to her, She was back in contact with authorities reporting that Tom had already crossed the line the order was meant to enforce. September 13, a Friday, Krystal was at the Spalding County Courthouse for a hearing unrelated to the divorce or the protective order. Reporting has connected this to her work in real estate. Tom Mallory was also at the courthouse that day, separately, for his own legal matter. He was facing charges connected to forgery and was expected to turn himself in on those charges the following Monday. According to Krystal's daughter, Precious Evans, a family friend asked a courthouse clerk in the magistrate's office to arrange an escort for Krystal as she left the building that day.
My mom literally called the sheriff department the day before because he was stalking her, and they did nothing. Had they had someone walked out with her, like, her friend asked, she would still be here.
Sheriff Daryl Dix later confirmed this request was made, but stated it was directed to a clerk, not to a deputy, and that no deputy was ever directly asked to provide one. Dix also stated that surveillance footage from the courthouse lobby showed Krystal walking past deputies on her way out and not requesting an escort herself. Both of these things can be true at the same time. A request was made. It did not reach the people positioned to act on it. Whether that gap was a communication failure, a procedural one, or something else, it is the space inside which the next few minutes took place. Krystal walked out of the Spalding County Courthouse alone. She walked to her car, parked facing north on 6th Street. She got in. Tom Mallory was already in a separate vehicle. He drove north on 6th Street, moving with the flow of traffic, and stopped his car beside hers. 2 days after her divorce was finalized. 1 day after she reported her protective order had already been violated. She had done everything the system asked of her, in the order it asked her to do it, right up until the moment none of it was close enough to help. Tom Mallory stopped his car beside Krystal's on 6th Street and fired multiple shots through the passenger side window of his own vehicle into hers. Deputies stationed at the front of the courthouse heard the gunfire and responded immediately. By the time they reached the scene, Tom was already driving away. Krystal Evans Mallory died at the scene from her injuries. Tom turned east onto Solomon Street. A marked police unit fell in behind him. He did not stop. When he finally did bring the vehicle to a halt, he turned the weapon on himself, shooting himself in the head. Griffin police officers rendered first aid at the scene and transported him to Grady Memorial Hospital in Atlanta. Warrants were obtained that same day charging Tom Mallory with felony murder, along with additional related charges. He survived the initial gunshot wound. Griffin police confirmed he was in the hospital in the days following the shooting, his condition not fully disclosed to the public. On September 28, 2024, Tom Mallory died from the injuries sustained during his self-inflicted gunshot. There would be no trial. No jury. No verdict. The felony murder charge filed against him closed with his death, not with a courtroom outcome. In the days between the shooting and his death, 2 accounts of what led to that morning circulated publicly, and they did not fully agree. Precious Evans told local reporters her mother had called the sheriff's department the day before the shooting to report that Tom was stalking her, and that nothing was done in response. Sheriff Daryl Dix disputed parts of that account in a lengthy public statement. He maintained that surveillance footage showed Krystal walking past deputies in the courthouse lobby without requesting assistance herself, and that the escort request from the family friend had gone to a courthouse clerk rather than a deputy. Precious responded publicly that the statement offered no condolences for her mother and functioned, in her words, to clear Tom's name rather than acknowledge what her family had lost.
Not once did you offer your condolences, sympathy, or anything for my mom. That post was to clean his face, to clear his name.
Both statements are part of the public record. Neither erases what deputies confirm happened next. Precious Evans has said publicly she intends to keep pushing for accountability in her mother's name. If you want to see whether that push leads anywhere, subscribing keeps you here for it. Cases like this don't end when the news cycle moves on, and neither should the attention. Strip away the emotion in this case for a moment and look only at the mechanics, because the mechanics are what actually failed Krystal Evans Mallory. Georgia's family violence statute requires that once a primary aggressor is identified in a domestic violence call, that person's arrest is mandatory. The law does not leave room for discretion at that point. The failure in this case did not happen at the arrest stage. It happened before that, at identification. Across the documented calls to the Mallory residence, deputies were repeatedly unable to determine, with the evidence available to them, who that primary aggressor was. Conflicting accounts, inconsistent physical evidence, and witnesses who either saw nothing or described something that didn't match either party's version left the law with nothing solid to act on. This is not a hypothetical gap. It is a specific, identifiable point in the process where a law built to protect someone in Krystal's position had no mechanism to engage. Tom Mallory's death on September 28, 2024, closed the criminal case without ever testing these facts in a courtroom. No trial means no cross-examination of the sheriff's account against the family's account. No jury ever weighed the escort request, the surveillance footage, or the years of prior calls against each other under oath. The felony murder warrant against him exists in the public record, but it will never be adjudicated. For a case built almost entirely on two competing public statements, that absence of a courtroom record leaves the central disagreement permanently unresolved. What the case did produce was renewed public scrutiny of courthouse safety protocols, specifically, the question of how a request for an escort, made by a family member on behalf of someone under an active protective order, can be made and still not reach the person positioned to act on it. Advocacy groups working in Griffin have pointed to this case directly when discussing the gap between having a protective order on paper and having that order actually enforced in the moments it matters most. Precious Evans has said publicly that she intends to keep fighting for accountability in her mother's name, including through continued advocacy and public pressure on the systems involved. Her mother did everything the process asked of her. The process did not do the same in return. That is the question this case leaves behind, and it is one still without a clean answer. Krystal Evans Mallory documented her fear for over a year, in public, with her name and his name attached, so that no one could ever say they didn't know. She did that not knowing if it would save her. It didn't. But it did make sure her story couldn't be quietly erased, and it's part of why this case is still being talked about today. If you're new here, welcome to Crime Scalers. Subscribe if you want more cases examined this closely. Let us know in the comments what you took from this one, and where you're watching from. We'll see you in the next one.